Ooh, I believe that's recording. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Strimzi Community Call on Thursday, the 20th of February. So I've started the recording. Is there anyone who has any pull requests or other issues that they'd like to discuss as a starting point? Cool. Moving swiftly on then. Anyone got any proposals they want to talk about? So I will just add one. I haven't pushed the change yet, but I'm expecting to push a change for my cert manager proposal. So anyone who has been looking at that proposal, then I'm hoping today before I finish working, I will push up another update. So keep an eye out for that. But I'll add that onto the agenda later. Actually, I found the link. Well, let's go straight on to issue triage then. Hopefully you can all see the issue triage page now.
Yep.
Okay, so starting with ability to check a condition when updating a Kafka node pool. So my understanding of this issue is it's around being able to see the current state of your Kafka pods as part of the node. So the example they've given is if you're doing an update and changing the role of your pods, being able to see it being rolled out across the cluster. And it was triaged in the last community call on the 23rd of January. And we said we would think a bit more about looking at the options. Have any of the maintainers had a look at this or have any more thoughts on this particular issue?
I think whatever the solution is, it anyway needs to go through the proposal. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I didn't have the time. Sorry for that. But yeah, anyway, we need the proposal. I agree.
So maybe just to clarify what exactly the issue is, because I'm not sure if anyone fully understands it. The point is that when you make a change to the Kafka custom resource, then it updates the generation of the custom resource. And that's reflected in the observed generation in the status of the Kafka custom resource. But we don't have anything like that for the Kafka node pool. So when you update the Kafka node pool, it changes the generation, but there's no matching observed generation there. So yeah, I guess something what we can consider is around having the node pool observed generations in the Kafka CR or something like that, because I don't think just tracking the observed generation in the node pool, it's completely simple because it needs to progress. It needs to update some status information early in the reconciliation cycle, such as the assigned node IDs and so on. And that's why it might not be as simple as just having the observed generation in the node pool itself. So I don't think it's completely simple, and that's why proposal, I think, makes sense for it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sounds to me like everyone believes it is a good idea, but like you say, I think a proposal is the right way to do this.
Sorry, Jakub, can you elaborate a little bit more why it's tricky or even it's not possible to have the observer generation in the Kafka node pool?
So the observed generation should reflect it's basically updated at the end of the reconciliation for the Kafka CR. But for the Kafka node pool, the first issue we have there is that the Kafka node pool is updated early in the cycle because it needs to persist the assigned node IDs. That's important if the operator crashes somewhere in the middle and so on, to not, for example, have multiple pods with the same ID just because something else changed in between and so on. So that's why it's not easy to store it in the in the Kafka node pool status, but also the Kafka node pool status itself doesn't have a concept of being ready or not ready. It has only the concept of having the pods be up to date or not up to date, but that's again tracked a bit asynchronously from the reconciliation when the pods are updated and so on. So yeah, I don't think you can just track it there because it would not be clear what it really means when the observed generation is updated, that it would actually not guarantee that the changes done in this generation were really applied and so on.
And of course, I guess that we cannot update the status twice at the end of the reconciliation as well, right?
We can, but you would need to have some special handling to how you update it, when you update what, and so on. But I would leave this for the proposal, to be honest, because we can spend another 20 minutes discussing the details of this. And I think there's a lot of other issues for triage.
Okay.
Well,
But if you want, we can talk about it in more detail on some other occasion, Paolo.
Yeah, sure.
what I'll do then is I'll say we think this enhancement is worth doing, but it would need a proposal. So I will add into proposal. Do we want to add help wanted, or do we think actually this is going to be a tricky one, so perhaps not? Does it need someone who's a bit more familiar with the internals?
I think it does need someone who's familiar with the internals, but question is whether someone familiar with the internals will have some time to look at it anytime soon.
Should we put help wanted to indicate that we're not actively doing this right now?
Yeah, I mean, is anyone planning to look into it anytime soon? If not, then I would probably put their help wanted, yeah.
I'll add it, and then if anybody plans to look at it, they can always remove the label. Okay, next.
Or anyway, helping the person that will take it from the community.
Yeah. So next we've got additional flags for the Kafka exporter. So this particular user identified some specific flags that they were interested in. And I had a quick look at the discussion, and I think the discussion was talking about whether or not we should use some mechanism to allow people to add many options, or should we just pick, I think we would just pick a few, but how would we particularly do that in an API? It sounded to me like nobody seemed like they wouldn't want to provide these additional options, but again, I think similar to the previous one, we need some sort of proposal to define exactly how we do it. I saw that it was triage previously. Any objections to this one, again, saying we would need a proposal?
Fine with me.
Yeah, fine with me.
And I guess similar question, is anyone planning to look at this? If not, I will add the help wanted.
I think this could be pretty simple for someone to start with.
Okay.
If we first agree, wait, the if is important. If we first agree how we want to have it handled on the API level and on the allow list versus forbid list approach. So
should I say this could be a good start issue once the proposal has been agreed?
yeah, even the proposal might be easy for someone to write if we have a better guidance on how to approach it. But basically, we didn't really come up to any conclusion about it in the discussion with Paolo. So it would be hard for someone to write it if we don't have the direction.
Yeah. I do think we have quite a few issues where if anyone who is more experienced user or a developer of Strimzi or any of the maintainers, if there are issues that you do feel you can't have time to actually work on the issue but do the proposal, I think we do have other issues that are in a similar state where if we can get a proposal put together of how we would implement it, then it might be that other people who haven't contributed as much to Strimzi could pick up those issues. This one, I believe, has a pull request which is open, so if nobody objects, I was just going to mark this as triage because I think the pull request is likely to be merged soon, last time I checked.
It should be ready for merge once the pipelines are finished.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So this was a bug reported, something to do with trust stores not loading correctly. I think we got some information from the user, but nowhere near the logs that we would need. And then they said that actually their system had gone away. So I would propose we just close this one and say they can reopen it if they see this issue again.
Yeah, sound good.
Yeah, I agree.
3 weeks old.
Okay, so the next one is an enhancement. So this was a request. So when you create a Kafka user resource, you provide your ACLs and you can set the resource matching based on prefix or literal, and they requested the use of match. And Jakob pointed out that match isn't supported in that way. And I did a check as well. And according to the KIP, which seems to be the only sort of documentation about the options, they explicitly have any and match listed as for filters only. So I can see we've got a few Kafka committers on the call. Is there anyone who disagrees with this statement that when you're doing ACLs, you can't use any and match for actually creating the ACLs? It's just when you're listing or I think deleting them as well. So we haven't had a yes or a no. Do we want to reach out to any individuals in the community to get confirmation of this, or should we go ahead and close it?
I was pretty sure about it, so I would just close it.
Yeah, so the wording in the KIP seemed fairly clear to me, so.
I think there is also something in the docs.
Yes, I mean, the keep is pretty old, so it may not be fully up to date, but I'm 90% sure you're correct. What you say is correct.
Okay, let's go ahead and close this. Presumably I don't need to remove the labels, do I, if they're closed? I assume they're only seeing open issues. So the next bug, so this one is user set their controller quorum fetch timeout MS to -1. So I guess the theory was that with some other settings, if you set it to -1, it gets a default value or something. As far as I could see in the Kafka docs, there's nothing that says that -1 is a valid value. So there was a little bit of discussion about what Strimzi could do to validate this value. Yeah, I think my view of it was I'm not sure that we want to put the effort into validating this value, because to me a timeout -1 seems like an odd value to choose for that. But interested to know what others think.
I don't think it's completely nonsensical, because I think for some of the fields -1 means like unlimited.
Oh,
But the
okay.
problem is that we validate against the Kafka configuration, and that doesn't really give us this information. I actually think all the integer type fields make it a bit confusing whether they mean unsigned integer, signed integer, or what exactly will it be. And obviously for some of the fields, like for the quorum fetch timeout, which essentially defines when a controller is out of sync, the -1 as unlimited makes no sense, right? Because that would mean that however all data you have, you are still in sync.
Mhm.
But it's essentially, it seems like something that would be super hard for us to catch. And yeah, it kind of falls into the bin of all the different pitfalls where you can lead yourself, like when you badly configure the fields which can be only set to double the previous value or something like that. Like there's a lot of these traps where we rely on the user to set them correctly, and this seems like something what should fail in there as well.
Yeah. Anyone got any objections to us closing these to say we're not planning to implement it?
Yes, I think for Strimzi that's the right move. I wonder if this needs to be followed up upstream though. But yeah, I mean, setting that to -1 I think makes no sense here.
Do you want me to tag you on the issue, Mikhail, so you can follow it upstream?
Yeah, do that. So at least there's something in my inbox wherever I get to it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll try to figure out why or how is the validation of that field done.
So this one is another bug from a user. They had set their run as user to 1,000 and were seeing permission denied. And Jakob had already responded to saying that obviously the user has to make sure that they've chosen a security context they can access the files on disk. I mean, when I read your response, Jakob, I felt like that thoroughly explained the problem. So, and it was 3 weeks ago, the user hasn't come back. So I'd say we close this and they can reopen if they have other issues.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't need any more than that. Okay. So this was someone who was having trouble running on Docker desktop. So specifically, they were trying to expose a listener using the node port type. And I think had managed to get other container-based applications running, but was specifically struggling with Strimzi. I know from personal experience that yeah, depending on your operating system, I can't remember what operating system. Oh yeah, they are on Mac. Yeah, running things with node ports on Macs feels like it's not always the most straightforward anyway. But they seem to say that some of their other images worked or something.
So the problem is that the person is just looking for a problem and fails to read any links and informations and documentation provided to them, right? Because I gave this person at least twice or 3 times the link which explain how do we get the address, how can they override advertise host. But if you don't want a solution, if you are just on your way looking for a problem, then you will have a problem in these kind of environments. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, +1.
I think we just go ahead and close this one.
Yeah.
But anyway, it seems that he shared a YAML which was working for him, right?
Well, he used some kind of Bitnami image or something with a completely different deployment, which he managed to make working.
No, I
But
see a link to a YAML using a Strimzi image. If you scroll, yeah, this message. No,
This
if you
one?
scroll up, yes, this one. He said that here's a plain Strimzi which is working for me.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with Strimzi, right? He's just using the Strimzi container image.
Yeah, even because it's overriding a tons of environment variables. Even the advertised listeners.
Well, and they said never mind.
I guess it's up to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I close it as completed or not planned? We didn't actually do anything.
No, it's not planned. We didn't really solve this issue, right? We don't work on Docker desktop out of the box with his configuration.
Yeah. Okay, and then we've got a few Kafka access operator issues. So the first one here is somebody was asking about, the title is long-term question, and they were asking about whether the Kafka access operator would get folded into the Strimzi operator in the same way that you can deploy user operator and topic operator as like part of the entity operator. Which I think the answer is no, because we specifically expected people to deploy that access operator somewhere different. And we are intending to change it so that you can deploy it as in a single namespace rather than cluster scoped. But then this turned into more of a discussion of looking at both access operator and drain cleaner in terms of how visible they are within the documentation and whether users are aware of them and make use of them, because the person who raised this said that particularly drain cleaner, they hadn't realized how important it was until they, I guess, spent some time already running Strimzi. And I know that there were a few different pull requests and things that Paul had been opening around this. So I don't know if we want to use this as a jumping off point to talk about some of those, because I think there was a bit of discussion back and forth about where things should land. I know that I personally haven't managed to get back on the last set of comments on the issues. But I don't know if we want to just do that discussion now or just keep discussing on the issues. I think it was, I guess, Paul, Paolo, and Jakob that were adding.
Yes, I've had some feedback so far. So I don't know if you want to take some time up to discuss that now, but yeah, I mean, based on this thread, that I'm trying to improve the visibility of both the access operator and the drain cleaner in the documentation. So there's a split. We've got an introduction to all of the operators on the, well, potentially, I mean, it's still in progress, but all of the operators on the documentation page on the Strimzi website. So that should help improve visibility of the operators that are available there. And also revisiting the overview and what we've got, what we say on operators in the deploying guide as well. So yeah, that's work in progress, a separate PR in the Strimzi operator.
I think you are using a wrong grouping, Paul. There's no Strimzi operators where you are adding it. That's the documentation of the Strimzi cluster operator.
Yeah.
Right. So this is not part of the cluster operator, and that's intentionally not part of the cluster operator.
But we do discuss, well, we do have a whole section on the access operator in the docs.
It's basically a separate project with its own release cycle and its own set of users, right? So you can, for example, have its own docs for how to use it. And you can, as I suggested in one of the PRs, like in the section where you talk about how the user operator, for example, treats multi-namespace stuff, that's where the people interested in that might be interested to learn that there is some access operator which might make these things easier.
Yeah, I mean, I did respond to that, and I do agree that that's probably something that we should investigate. But I do think that maybe if people are just skimming through the guide and want to know what operators are available, maybe one place where we talk about all of them wouldn't be a bad idea.
But like, people shouldn't go to the cluster operator documentation to find out what are all the operators available, right? Like, that's the cluster operator documentation.
Yeah,
maybe I was missing the point of in the issue. I think this is he was kind of pointing out that maybe we should make these options more visible.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you include them in the documentation of something else, right?
Yeah.
Like,
why
wouldn't you include it in the bridge documentation, for example? That would also make it more visible, right? But it doesn't really belong there. And the same with the cluster operator docs.
So we should remove the drain cleaner documentation as well, because it's there, I guess, since long time.
So the drain cleaner is something completely different. The drain cleaner, essentially, if you are running Strimzi in production, then the drain cleaner is something where you should say no to it, intentionally knowing what the consequences are, or you should use it.
Yeah, but it's anyway not part of the operator's documentation, while we have the drain cleaner.
It's essential to use the cluster operator.
Yeah, I don't know if we are, so the documentation is about what is essential or what so the component belongs to. Because it means that on one side you are saying the access operator cannot be there because it doesn't belong to operators. Drain cleaner belongs instead to this documentation. I'm confused.
I'm not saying it cannot be there. All I'm saying is that the access operator should be there pretty much on the same level as the config providers, for example, are, because it's pretty much the same level in the hierarchy of the project, right? It's a utility which will few percent of the Strimzi users will find it useful. They will use it in their specific use cases. But the overview of the Strimzi operators documentation also doesn't say that we have these config providers. It talks about that in the sections where they might provide useful solutions for the needs people might have. But it's not listed in all the overviews and everywhere, right? And it's the same with the access operator from my perspective. Whereas the drain cleaner is a bit different because you should use that in your production Kafka clusters.
So I think
this is what I still don't get, or maybe I don't agree. So the sense that you want to include something in the doc because we think, of course, not just you, that it's important to have. So you want to put there instead of
It's not about thinking what's important. It is important. That's fact, right?
yeah, okay. But anyway, if we say that the documentation is about the cluster operator, drain cleaner is not part of the cluster operator. So it depends on what's
But
the
I'm not saying
definition of
that the
our
drain cleaner,
documentation.
I'm not saying that the drain cleaner operation, the documentation should be part of the operator's documentation. But as it's key to using the operator to run Kafka clusters, then it makes sense to have there prominently explained that, yeah, if you are using Strimzi to run Kafka in production, you should also look at this drain cleaner thing. I don't think that applies at the same level to the access operator. Whether that links to some separate documentation or not, I don't care about it that much.
Yeah,
think-
so why, for example, we cannot put, if like Kate is sharing, right? We have a separated link for the Kafka bridge documentation.
So this page is completely
there.
screwed up, right? So the title says Strimzi 045 documentation. But then it actually lists the bridge there, which isn't really part of Strimzi 045 release. And if you would release bridge 032 next week, then actually this page will actually automatically update it to 032, despite Strimzi 045 actually using the 031 version, right? So
Yeah.
like, I think you need to separate the PR which changed this page, which probably would be worth to kind of have a bigger restructuring and then kind of separate what's part of what release and either think on providing here only the operators or have it represented as a separate section for each of the projects, right? But then there is a separate question about what do you want to have in the documentation of the Strimzi operators itself. I think those are not necessarily the same questions and have the same solution.
No, yeah, I agree that this page could be, misleading can be a little bit misleading. Maybe we should have a kind of a Strimzi ecosystem documentation with what about the operator, which has a version, another for the bridge, and then the links to the others.
The problem is that the things, how we release them and advertise them are a bit screwed up, right? If you are using the operator, the cluster operator at its core, as most of the users, then likely you would want to have the bridge documentation here going exactly to the version supported by Strimzi operator 045, right?
Yeah, right.
But we advertise it to other users as well, and those, if we release 032, then they will likely use 032 as the latest version, so they would want to have that as the documentation linking there. So that's why kind of this page is it's kind of a mess, and it's all kind of confusing and gets just more confusing if we just add there the other things without kind of changing how it looks.
I think my feeling is that I don't necessarily feel like this page that I'm showing here is the right place to talk about drain cleaner or the access operator, because you wouldn't ever use them except for with the cluster operator. It makes sense that bridge is here, and therefore it would kind of make sense to have the topic operator and the user operator here. I think for me, where I think we are perhaps missing the access operator and drain cleaner is in the overview, so that when someone comes fresh to the project, this page I feel like should tell them these are all the things we do. So for example, like right down the bottom, we talk about cruise control. There's like Kafka exporter here. Things like the config providers maybe should also be listed here. I feel like if you came and read this page, you should get like a rough overview of all the different projects that exist. I don't think that the deploying guide, we should necessarily put access operator like front and center in here when I think it was this section, maybe the Strimzi operators. I'm not sure whether it makes sense to put it here, because I feel like you were saying, Jakob, it's for a specific purpose, and maybe it makes more sense to talk about it at that lower level, because it's not kind of, when you're first getting started, these are the three operators you'd be looking at, in the same way that we talk about drain cleaner like somewhere further down. And we do talk about access operator. I think that makes sense, but I do personally think that we should have it somewhere on this overview page, so that at least if people are trying to get an overview of the whole project, they can see what different components there are.
Yeah, but then you need to explain what does it actually do, right? Because otherwise you will get just questions from confused people who will think that they have to use the access operator for whatever reason. I'm pretty sure we will be getting these questions if the PRs are merged as they are right now. I installed access operator because the documentation told me so, and now what should I actually do about it?
But if we update,
I think we have a recognition that maybe we should make these things more visible, and we've also got an opportunity now to make some improvements both to the documentation web page and also to the overview. So we've got the two PRs open. I guess it's just finessing where we need to add this content, which you know, we can discuss on those PRs.
Also, we were discussing the Strimzi overview. It's a Strimzi overview. So as Kate said, we have other stuff. So it's anyway good to mention access operator and drain cleaner in Strimzi overview, which is one of the PRs, right, Paul?
Yeah, that's right.
Paul, do you have, am I right in thinking you have two PRs open, one for
So we've got
page
this,
and then one for...
yeah, I mean, if you want to, you could show the preview of the changes. But yeah, so this page, I mean, yeah, I was only updating it to provide some visibility to what was discussed in that issue. But if we want to expand it to improving the page generally, we can do that. And same goes for the overview. We've got a PR open for that as well. So now's the opportunity to have it how we want it.
Jakob, were you objecting to having the access operator being so visible in both the overview and the deploying and upgrading, or were you more concerned about the deploying and upgrading guide?
I think we need to build a hierarchy in which we present the different tools to the users in the right use cases to make sure they understand what to use when. I don't think the PRs really fulfill that. And I think it's really important to see these things really separately for drain cleaner and for access operator. The access operator, I think it's unfinished for what most users would want to use it for, because it doesn't have the multi-cluster access. If you don't do multi-cluster access, then actually copying the secrets, it's in most cases better solution within the same cluster, because you have much better control over who gets to access the credentials, who gets to request them, and how. So that's one point that I think at this point we got the first release out after 2 years, but I think it's still basically unfinished.
Yeah.
Right. Second, even once it's finished, my guess is that it will be something what will be used by 5% of our users, maybe. Right. So it's interesting tool which fits some particular use cases. And I think it's much better to advertise it when talking about those use cases and not kind of push it to the users flat out if we think that most of them will not necessarily be interested in it and will use it. Like, you can of course argue that you think 95% of the users will use it, and sure, that's just a subjective opinion, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the drain cleaner, it's something completely different. Like, I don't necessarily care whether it has a separate documentation, whether it's part of the operator's documentation. But if you don't know about the drain cleaner and what role does it play, and you use Strimzi in production, then you don't really have high available production Kafka clusters, right? Because only the drain cleaner guarantees that in some of the situations. So while it might be completely fine if the users decide that they don't want to use it, or if they don't drain the nodes randomly and so on, then that's fine. But probably all of the users who deploy the Kafka brokers through Strimzi should be aware of drain cleaner and what role does it play. So that's why I think that's very different. And I think the documentation should present these things in their order of importance, right? You don't want to start the documentation by presenting the users with the 10 different projects which we have, because we have both 2 different config providers, drain cleaner, access operator, HTTP bridge, MQTT bridge, topic, user, cluster operator. What else? Canary is dead, but maybe I forgot something. So like, sure, we want all the users to use these, but the way we present them should maybe reflect their importance for the users and they're relevant to the users and how should they kind of focus on them. You don't want to just kind of put a huge list of different tools in front of them and kind of tell them, deal with it, figure out which matter for you, which don't matter for you. You want to present it in some more streamlined fashion to correspond to their role in the project, I think.
Yep. So, well, in circling back to the original issue, it was obviously drain cleaner that was pulled out as a particular thing that the user hadn't been aware of. So what if we do this as a way forward? Paul, I'm going to propose this, and then Jakob and Paolo say if you're happy with this approach. If we get Paul to update the PR to remove the Kafka access elements, and then we can have the PRs focus on the addition of drain cleaner, because I think we're more in agreement of how that would work. And then Paul, I can work with you offline to work out where the access operator, and in general, we can have other chats about the general structure. But to me, it sounds like we're more on the same page for the drain cleaner. So I think focusing the PRs drain cleaner specific, I think would help to move this forward. Does that sound like a good approach?
That's okay by me. I'm just wondering if this became a documentation issue. Is that enough to satisfy it? I think that was your original question, Keith.
Yeah, I guess you have a PR. Do we need to raise a separate issue to have these discussions in?
I would probably close this issue because it's basically out of place where it is right now. The title doesn't really have any value and so on. And if we need some issue, I would open an issue in the operators repo. If we are fine to continue working on the PRs we have the PRs and we don't really need a separate issue. But if we want to have some issue tracking this, then I would kind of suggest we close this one and we open a new issue in the operators repo, which better describes the ideas.
Okay, I will go ahead and close this, and I will make a note to myself to open an issue to cover this. Everyone happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
So in any case, I guess that what Jakob was saying that could be misleading, as the example is about having Strimzi 045 documentation, and then we have the bridge 032, which is not really the reality. I guess that at some point we should start, on this page, we should start a discussion about refactoring this page, just to have a kind of, Strimzi suite or Strimzi ecosystem documentation where you have the components put in the right place. So the operator is not strictly related to the bridge documentation, to the access, to the drain cleaner and so on. So maybe, Paul, we should start thinking to refactoring this part.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much a separate issue, right? It's just something what was
No, yeah,
highlighted
absolutely, yes.
by the idea that if you add more of the stuff, we start getting this kind of version chaos of what's released, what's documented, what's in the cluster operator installation files, and so on.
Okay, so moving on, this is another access operator one. So this is a simpler issue, hopefully, to discuss. So this is just about, at the moment, you create a Kafka access custom resource, requesting access to specific Kafka with a user, etc. And then the access operator creates a secret where it puts all of your credentials and the connection information for the Kafka cluster. And this was asking whether we can determine the name and the namespace that you want the secret to be created into. Jakub had responded to this around the namespace. I think my feeling, if I interpreted your sentence correctly, is the same in that I think where you create the Kafka access custom resources where we should create the secret. I don't think we need to provide additional configuration for that. I think we could provide options for the name though, if people need that.
So like the namespace idea came up many times in the user operator, right? And we always rejected it there because you can't really keep track easily of the secrets. You can't use owner references and so on across the namespaces. And it really also creates kind of a mess in the RBAC rights, which you need and so on. And like, if we wanted to have the namespace there, then with the current state of the access operator, without the cross Kubernetes cluster access, I think if we added the support for creating the secrets in a different namespace to the Kafka user resources in the first place, we don't need the access operator as it exists today, right? So I'm not sure why I would see any sense in adding it here. I would stick with keeping the same namespace. And I would probably stick with I would be careful to give complete configuration for the names because that kind of leads to a lot of problems and conflicts, and again, kind of more chaos. So it's also like we should be realistic, right? It took us 2 years to get the 0.1.0 release of the access operator, and we didn't touch it since, apart from fixing the Helm chart, which we screwed up and didn't do in the first place in the 0.1.0 release. So I think being realistic and limiting the scope at this point, it's also something to keep in mind.
So I did wonder if we wanted to at least go back to the user and ask what their reasoning was for wanting a different name to understand the use case. I accept that obviously we haven't done much work on that access operator recently, but I think this would be a small change to make, but I think it probably would be worth understanding why they need it, because I think in terms of tracking, it's probably easier if the names are the same.
Well, it's a small change, only that much, right? The code change will be probably small, but if nothing else, you will be asked to do the next release, which will take you, what, a day or something, and so on. So it starts backing up and up and up and up. So it is a small change, but you know, few more of these small changes and you are not doing anything else than the access operator.
Does anyone have any other points of view on this?
But it's definitely a fair point asking for the use case. What, as you suggested, like that's nothing wrong about that, of course.
Okay. I'll leave this with the needs triage then, and then hopefully they'll come back and we can triage it in the next one.
I think you need to go back and refresh.
Yeah, I think it's got page 2 on there. So that one, this one. So this is another access operator one. So this was around providing more of a template, I guess, for the secret, and where things are placed in the secret, I think.
So no offense to anyone, but this is just dumping the work on the community, right? You don't want to update your application so that it reads the password from this environment variable or this file. You are not willing to change the name in your configuration, and you want the community to kind of make instead everything customizable and maintain it so that you don't need to do it. That doesn't seem to kind of make sense to me.
Well, I think the user sort of said that yeah, they didn't seem that bothered about it not being fixed. I was trying to remember what the actual structure is. We do provide a lot of the properties already with like variations of names that fulfill the different applications. So my feeling was that actually, unless more users ask for this, I don't think we would want to do this. Or if they had specific like known libraries or things like that that they wanted to be compatible with, I think that would make more sense. So I would probably vote to close it and then say other people can raise new issues or I don't know if you can comment on a closed issue. I guess you can.
Yeah, I would close it.
Okay,
Sorry,
we've got.
Kate, I guess you didn't close the issue.
Oh, did I not? I'll do it at the end.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got 3 left. So this one is around field selectors. So this allows you to select fields in your custom resources. So I think there was an example. This one is quite a good example, I think, of the idea. So being able to list things based on a field selector. So the issue is around adding support for this within Strimzi. I think this, is a good idea. I was thinking, I wonder if you could add things for some of the other resource types. I didn't have too much time to think in depth about it, but whether there are connectors, so whether you could filter on like the type of connector or things like that might be cool. But I think this does need a proposal.
It's also kind of forward-looking thing, right? This just moved to stable in Cube 132.
Yeah.
And I think if you have it in the CRD file, then all the Kubernetes versions which don't have this enabled might reject it. So it's more to track something what someone can look into one day, but I'm not sure if this is something what can be worked on and utilized today. I think in a way we are kind of missing some long-term backlog to track things like that, which are useful to look into in 2 years, for example.
Yeah, I think with our existing process, I guess we would mark this as triaged and say at some point when this feature has been in a stable version for longer and therefore is within the range that we support, we should address that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but do you know what happens? So if we have this one and I was looking at the documentation, you have these selectable fields into the CRD. What happens if you apply the schema, so install the CRD on a older Kubernetes version? Is just, I don't know, ignoring it?
As I said, I think it will be rejected. So that's why I think it's not something
Okay.
to work on. Like someone would, I didn't try it, but for other CRD things such as the cell validation and so on, I think it was the case that it was rejected by the Kubernetes version not supporting it. So yeah, you would need to have kind of either multiple CRD versions or yeah, you just need to wait until we support only Cube 132 and newer.
Right.
So we have 2 issues left and 2 minutes left. So the first one is an enhancement around supporting the Kubernetes Gateway TLS route on Kafka listeners, and the user had provided a sort of suggested solution. Jakob obviously responded saying that we probably would want to support the Gateway API directly at some point, but there are workarounds for this today. This feels like something that could be interesting, but definitely feels like we would need a proposal and more thought in terms of not do we implement this, but how do we solve problems in this space?
Yeah, it should definitely have a proposal. But also, as I said, basically this part of the gateway API, it's currently not G8. So I'm not sure if we want someone to start working on the proposal right
Okay.
now or whether we want to wait for. So I had it on my to-do list. I would have probably looked at it, but not as long as it's experimental only.
Yeah.
But like we don't wait for everything to be completely GA in all cases, right? So
Yeah.
like whether to wait or not, it's surely something that can be discussed, of course.
Okay, let's do the last one then. So the last one is support configuring spec.subdomain for OpenShift routes. So this person was creating routes for external access. This one, I know it's last week. I don't remember seeing this one. Jakob, are you able to give an overview?
So there are many different fields you can configure in the OpenShift route resource, and one of them is a subdomain. And you can also configure the domain or the host, or you can completely manage the routes yourself. So my take is that I don't think we want to support yet another niche use case, how to do something for one user when there are workarounds available.
Yeah, I remember now. The problem was specifically the character length, wasn't it? That their host was long. And there are, like you say, workarounds. And they were sort of saying, oh, well, it would be a small addition to Strimzi, but it would save me a lot of time. But actually, it's, like you say, it's another niche. So yeah, I agree that I feel like we don't want to change this, I don't think.
Yeah.
Anyone else object? Oh. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining, and hope you'll have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks
Thanks very
Kate.
much.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye all.
Around, bye.